Hey everyone, welcome to V&A Crafts. I'm Acenet. If you watched yesterday's video, then you know that today is another recipe video. This one is a meat option. So the entree that I'm going to be showing you how to do today, well, within my family, we call it carne de boda, which in English translates to wedding meat. So the reason why we call it that, oftentimes Hispanics will call it guisado or guisado de res, guisado de puerco, depending on whether it's beef or pork. Guisado basically means cooked, so it's basically like cooked meat when you translate it in English. The reason why my family calls it carne de boda is because it's an entree that's usually served at big events such as weddings, quinceañeras. It's a typical entree that is served at parties, but that doesn't mean that it only has to be for parties. This is an amazing recipe that tastes delicious. It will make you want to lick your fingers. It's really good. If you're a vegetarian or vegan and do not eat any meat, it does not mean that you can't make this. The sauce is basically what makes this entree very delicious. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, you can still make this. Alone with the rice, the sauce tastes. I like to pour the sauce over my rice, so if you're vegan or vegetarian, you can basically just make the rice and the sauce alone and combine them together. Delicious. Oftentimes when people cook this, they cook it with a lot of oil, and yes, oil adds a lot of delicious flavor, but I tend to not like to use very much oil. I try to use as little oil as possible, but my mom would probably tell me to add a lot more oil than I do. However, I don't like to use a lot of oil, so I just stick to my cooking spray. If you find that you need more oil, by all means go ahead. But let me go ahead and take you over the ingredients so we can get started. To start off, you'll need some meat. I'm using boneless beef English cut shoulder roast. However, you can use any beef you want. It also doesn't have to be beef. You can use pork, you can use chicken if you'd like. But my favorite way of making it, and the traditional way, is with beef. I'm using 5 pounds of beef. However, you want to make sure you cut off a lot of the fatness, and you want to dice it up into bite-sized pieces like this. Keep in mind that beef does tend to shrink whenever you cook it. You're also going to need some cooking spray. I'm using olive oil, some salt, and some black pepper, about 6 Roma tomatoes, roughly around 3/4 of a pound. You don't have to use Roma tomatoes, just make sure it's somewhere around 3/4 of a pound worth of tomatoes. About 4 cloves of garlic peeled, about 3 Guajillo Chilis. These can be found at your local Mexican grocery store. They can even be found in the Hispanic aisle at Walmart. Guajillo chili is not spicy. It is mainly a chili that is used to give color to recipes. You'll see what I mean once we get into the recipe. You're going to need to boil these, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You can actually make a whole batch of these, boil them, and then keep them in the freezer for future recipes. That way you save some time on boiling them and you already have them boiled. You're going to need a pinch of ground cloves, about 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground cumin. You're also going to need 1 beef bouillon cube. To make the rice, you're going to need about 1/2 cup of rice. This amount of rice serves for 2 people. You're also going to be needing some water. I'd say about 2 cups, and 1 tomato bouillon cube. You can also find this in the Hispanic aisle at Walmart or any other Mexican grocery store. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your chili and you're going to pop open the top. And what you're going to want to do is take these seeds out. Even though this chili is not spicy, these seeds are. So you're going to want to make sure you take all of those out, or as many as you can. If you have gloves, use gloves just to make sure you don't get your hands kind of spicy. So what I do is I open this up like so with my finger. I pretty much open it. Tend to see this little thing at the top, and I just roll it down. That's usually where the seeds are attached to. So you can then dispose of the seeds and this, and you're going to do the same thing for all of your chilies. Another caution to have with this chili is that, like I mentioned at the beginning, This chili is not spicy and it's mainly used for color. Therefore, it is a type of chili that will stain. So you want to make sure that once you have boiled this, you try not to get it on your clothes. And if you happen to spill any on the counters, then make sure that you clean it right away. And that goes for your pans and for your blender as well, because we will be blending this. Now that I have my chilies seedless, I'm going to go ahead and put them in a pot with some water and get them to boil until they're soft. It doesn't really take that long. Once it starts boiling, it's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes. So it doesn't take too much once it's already boiling. I'm going to go ahead and place my chilies in a small saucepan just because there are just a few here. I'm going to go ahead and put some water in there, enough to cover them up. And I'm going to go ahead and place a lid on it just so that it can start to boil a little faster and maintain the heat inside. As you can see, my chili is boiling. It is pretty much done. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and set it off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and start cooking my meat. And I'm going to spray my pan with some cooking spray. I'm going to go ahead and toss my meat right in. I'm going to go ahead and spray the top of my meat. I'm also going to go ahead and sprinkle my salt and give it all a mix. As this is cooking, you'll notice that the meat is starting to release some water, and you're basically going to let your tomatoes cook. If you don't feel comfortable putting your tomatoes in with the meat while it's cooking, you can go ahead and just cook them in a separate pan all alone, either by boiling them or grilling them like this. In my case, this is pretty much the biggest pot I have, so this is the only thing I can pretty much deal with. You're pretty much going to want to keep the tomatoes in here until they're completely cooked through. Attempting to cover this as much as I can. Like I said, this is the biggest pan that I have. However, it doesn't have a lid, so I'm just using one of the lids that I have for my second largest pan. So once some of your tomatoes are cooked, you can start adding them to your blender. Like this one is pretty much cooked through. As you can see, you don't need to add a lot of oil to this because it does let a lot of water out. And yes, oil does provide a lot of flavor. However, I don't really fancy a really oily meal. That's just my opinion. If you'd like to add more oil, feel free to. Meanwhile, the meat is cooking. We're going to go ahead and get started on our rice. I'm going to put a small skillet under medium-high heat. I'm going to pour our rice, and I'm going to put about a tablespoon of oil. You're going to want to start to fry this, and what you're looking for is for most of your rice to go from translucent to white. So right here you can see it's pretty clear. You'll see what I mean by white in just a second. You want to make sure that you're constantly stirring this. You see how the grains are starting to turn white? It's pretty much what you want. We still got a few translucent ones in here, as you can see. You're going to want to make sure to get almost all of them white. Make sure they don't start to burn though. Okay, so once most of them are pretty much white, you're going to go ahead and add water enough to cover the rice up. You're going to break up the tomato bouillon cube into the rice and pretty much going to add flavor and color. You're going to stir that in, pop the lid on, and keep an eye on it. Once you see that most of the water has evaporated, you're going to put water again, enough to cover the rice up, stir it, put the lid back on, and you're pretty much doing this for a total of 3 times. On the last time, you can turn the heat off and just let it sit so that it soaks up that last amount of water, and it's pretty much done. Pretty easy. Okay, so you'll start to notice that your water will start to evaporate, and this is when you'll want to work a little bit quickly. You want this meat to grill up a bit. Now that all my tomatoes are done, I put them in my blender. I'm also at this time going to add my chilies, my garlic, my beef bouillon cube, my ground cumin, my cloves, and my black pepper. I'm gonna go ahead and blend this up. The black pepper tends to give it a little bit of a kick, so if you do not want it to have that little bit of a kick, just exclude the pepper. That is pretty much it, guys. You're gonna go ahead and let this cook through a little bit just to make sure that the spices cook. Alright guys, so my rice is also pretty much done. I'm gonna go ahead and plate this up and I'll be right back to finish things up. Alright guys, so that is pretty much it. It is smelling amazing in here. I've plated my food up and I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little bit of a taste. I would say that for this dish to be complete, you need to add the lime. I also went ahead and added some salt to my rice. You can taste it first without adding any lime, but I'm telling you, the lime is gonna boost things up. So I like to add sauce to my rice. Usually I'll eat all of my meat first and then I'll just mix the remaining sauce with the rice. A lot of other people just mix everything together. You can do that too, but alright guys, so like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is what I call carne de boda, wedding meat. You can choose to call it just cooked meat if you want, guisado. You don't necessarily have to make this entree with beef. You can make it, like I mentioned, with pork, with chicken, you name it. The most traditional though is with beef, so I'll leave that up to you. And if you've been following along, then you know that this is the 4th video in this little mini series of Valentine's Day. So that is it for this week. Moving on from now, I will only be posting 1 video per week on my channel. So make sure you're subscribed down below and you click on the notification bell so you can be notified once those videos are up every week. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate all of the support I've been getting. I really appreciate all the shares, all of the likes, and all of the people who have subscribed to my channel. Like I mentioned in the very first video, I have a lot of videos planned out for this year, and I'm hoping that you guys will stick around throughout the year to watch. That is all from VNA Crafts for this week. I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!